I had a gut feeling my spouse was gearing up to end our marriage, so I quietly safeguarded my wealth. 2 weeks later, she initiated divorce proceedings, only to retract when her scheme unraveled. Greetings, everyone. Before we dive into today's video, I need your support. We've noticed a dip in the channel's momentum, and hitting that subscribe button is a fantastic way to help us out. It's free, takes a second, and keeps us creating content you love. Your encouragement means the world. Let's grow this community together. Thank you so much. Now, let's get into the video. Hey there, I've been lurking in these forums for ages, never imagining I'd have a story to share. But life throws curveballs, and I've been carrying this weight for months. I need to get it off my chest. To be clear, I'm not one to assume the worst or leap to wild conclusions. My wife, let's call her Elle, and I had been together for 6 years, married for 4. Things seemed rock solid, or so I believed. We had our share of highs and lows, but nothing screamed trouble. Honestly, for most of our relationship, we were that couple, devoted partners in sync. We'd crack up over silly private jokes, bicker endlessly about movie choices, and had a rhythm that just clicked. She'd plan thoughtful date nights, and I'd surprise her with her favorite takeout after a tough day. It felt natural, like we'd cracked the code to love. So when things shifted, it hit me like a freight train. About 6 months ago, the change began. At first, it was subtle. Things you'd overlook if you weren't paying close attention. She started keeping her phone glued to her side, even for a quick trip to the bathroom or while doing chores. Before, her phone would lie untouched on the counter for hours, and she didn't care who glanced at it. One day, I teased, "What, you running a covert operation now?" She laughed it off, saying, "Work's been texting me nonstop." Fair enough. But then, a few days later, she added a passcode. That threw me off because she'd never bothered with one before. When I casually asked why, she mumbled something about privacy and cyber threats. I didn't push, not wanting to seem paranoid, but it felt odd, and it didn't stop there. She started stepping out of the room to take calls, something she'd never done. It wasn't discreet either. Her phone would buzz and she'd say, "Oh, I'll just take this quick," before vanishing to the bedroom or out to the patio. When I asked who it was, she'd brush it off with, "Just a work pal." Then I noticed another quirk. She'd place her phone face down on the table. I didn't even know that was a red flag until I reached for something near her, and she swiftly slid her phone away. It was a fleeting moment, but it stuck with me, increasing distance. But it wasn't just the phone. She started feeling detached. Our easygoing chats now felt like a chore. When I mentioned future plans, like where to go for our anniversary or saving for a new car, she'd give a vague, "Yeah, we'll figure it out," and change the topic. It all crystallized one day when she said she was grabbing coffee with a friend. I happened to be nearby running errands, so I thought, why not surprise her? It'll be sweet. But when I got there, she wasn't with a friend. She was pacing outside the cafe, phone to her ear, looking intense. I stayed in my car, sensing something serious. I didn't mean to overhear, but I caught snippets like, "It's nearly set," and "a fresh start soon." My heart sank. I couldn't piece it together, but it didn't sound like a work issue or a friend's drama. It felt bigger, like a plan she was orchestrating. When she got home, I asked how her coffee date went, keeping my tone light. She spun a detailed tale about her friend venting about a bad relationship. Her story was so smooth, I just stared for a moment. Then, out of nowhere, she brought up consolidating our finances. "We should organize everything in one place," she said. "You know, accounts, passwords, documents for emergencies." I blinked. "What kind of emergencies?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She shrugged. "Just in case. What if something happens to one of us? Or we need to make a big financial move fast?" Her reasoning sounded logical, but her delivery felt off, too practiced, too perfect. I nodded, saying, "Sure, makes sense," but inside my instinct screamed. Why now? Why this sudden push to streamline our money when we'd always kept things separate and relaxed? That night I replayed her words, trying to decode them. The phone secrecy, the cafe conversation, her growing distance. It was adding up, and I didn't like the picture. Still, I held off acting. A few days later, she brought it up again. We were in the kitchen. I was fixing a snack. She was scrolling on her phone when she said, "Have you thought about sorting out the bank stuff? Like, do you know where all our account info is?" I set down my knife and turned to her. "Okay, what's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice steady but firm. "You've been fixated on our finances lately. Is there something we need to discuss?" She looked up, startled that I'd called her out. "No, nothing's wrong," she said quickly, forcing a laugh. "I just think it's smart, you know, for emergencies." "Emergencies like what?" I pressed. She shrugged, her face unreadable. "I don't know, just life. It's not a big deal, I swear." Her answer was too slippery, too evasive. I nodded and dropped it, but her dodging only fueled my unease. It didn't feel like a casual suggestion anymore. It felt like she was hiding something, and I didn't know what. So the next day, while she was at work, I checked our finances. Logging into our joint account, I found something odd. Over the past month, small transfers had been made. Nothing huge, but sums that didn't tie to bills or regular expenses. I didn't want to overreact, but it looked like she was quietly moving money for some purpose I couldn't pin down. I thought about confronting her, but held back. If I was wrong, I'd look foolish. If I was right, I needed to be cautious. It gnawed at me, so I called a trusted friend from college who's also a lawyer. I laid out what I'd noticed, trying not to sound like a tinfoil hat wearer. "I'm not saying something's definitely up," he said, "but you're not crazy for wanting to protect yourself. If you're worried, act now. Better safe than sorry." He outlined simple steps to shield my finances if things went south. Taking such measures felt extreme. It was like preparing for a disaster I wasn't sure was coming. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. If she was planning something, and I was starting to believe she was, I had to protect myself. It wasn't an easy call. This wasn't just about money. It was about the life we'd built. I kept flashing back to our wedding, late-night talks about our future, and the quirky inside jokes we shared. How did we end up here? Was this what our marriage had become? Taking these steps felt like admitting the trust we'd had was gone. That night while she was out, I opened my laptop, hands trembling. I pulled up our accounts, bank, investments, property deeds. Each document I reviewed felt like a betrayal, but a voice in my head insisted this was about survival, not sabotage. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I just couldn't shake the feeling that I'd regret it if I didn't act. I listed everything I could transfer and how to do it discreetly. As I worked, guilt and resolve battled inside me. I'd trusted her completely for years, and now I was playing defense against the person I thought would always be my partner. Then I called my mom, keeping it vague. "I need you to hold some things for me," I said. "It's not bad, just a precaution." She paused, sensing what I wasn't saying. "Are you okay?" Her voice was thick with worry. "Yeah," I lied. "Just being careful." She didn't push, but I could hear the concern in her voice. "Of course, honey, whatever you need." Hanging up, I felt a mix of guilt and relief. I hated dragging her into this, but knowing she had my back steadied me. By the time Elle got home, I'd started the process. I transferred most of my assets, savings, investments, the house, to my mom's name. I left enough in our joint account to avoid suspicion, but the rest was secure. She didn't notice. She came in, pecked my cheek, and asked if I wanted to watch a movie. I played along, but inside I was a mess. Part of me felt like I'd betrayed her trust. Another part felt like I'd finally taken control of a situation spiraling out of hand. For the next few days, I kept up the facade. I didn't want her to suspect anything. She seemed content, even oddly upbeat at times. But instead of reassuring me, it heightened my suspicions. If she was scheming, she was hiding it well. What stood out, though, was that she never mentioned finances again, not after I'd questioned her. It was like the topic vanished from her mind. At first, I wondered if I'd overreacted, and she dropped it because it wasn't important. But the more I thought about it, the more it seemed deliberate, like she was avoiding it after I'd pushed back. I caught her glancing at me a few times, as if gauging my mood or debating whether to speak. Each time, she'd quickly look away, focusing on her phone, the TV, or a book. It was subtle, but it was there. It felt like she was waiting for me to bring it up, testing the waters without diving in. The silence only made me more uneasy. It wasn't like her to drop something she cared about, and her avoidance felt calculated. If she was planning something, I wasn't going to give her an opening. Whatever her next move was, I had to stay ahead. Something was brewing, but I didn't know when or how. All I could do was prepare. That night, I double-checked everything. I reviewed the paperwork, ensuring the transfers to my mom's name were airtight. The house, savings, investments, everything was locked in a watertight trust. I even called her to confirm she had all the documents. 2 weeks passed, and things seemed normal, too normal, honestly. She was suddenly affectionate, chatting about random things like work or dinner plans. It threw me off because she'd been distant for months, avoiding anything beyond surface-level talk. Part of me wondered if I'd misread everything. Maybe her odd behavior was just stress or something I didn't get. But then, one random Friday evening, she sat me down on the couch, turned off the TV, and said, "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. I knew what was coming before she said it. "I think we should divorce," she said, her voice so steady it felt rehearsed. It wasn't angry or emotional, just cold, like she was stating a fact. I stared as she laid out her reasons. She talked about needing space, wanting to find herself, feeling like she'd lost who she was in our marriage. Generic breakup lines that explained nothing. But then she said something that hit differently. I've given up a lot for you over the years, and I don't think you've ever appreciated it. I deserve better. That stung. It wasn't just that she wanted out. It was the way she framed it, like I owed her, like everything was my fault, and she was just taking what she was entitled to. As I sat there processing her words, a question nagged at me. Why now? Then she said something that clicked. A friend's been helping me see things clearly, she said, avoiding my eyes. A friend. I stayed calm, letting her talk, but my mind raced. Who was this friend? Why were they so involved in our marriage? The way she said it wasn't casual. It felt like someone had been coaching her, convincing her leaving me wasn't just a choice but a strategy. And the more she talked about her sacrifices and deserving better, the more skeptical I became. Sacrifices? What sacrifices? She'd been content with me, or so she claimed. I'd worked hard to give her the life she wanted, and it wasn't just about money. When she wanted to move closer to her job, I agreed, even if it meant a longer commute for me. When she wanted that expensive wellness retreat last year, I made it work, skipping a trip I'd wanted so she could go. I supported her through 2 career changes, encouraging her to take risks because I wanted her happy. I wasn't a distant husband. I showed up. I remembered anniversaries and little things she loved. When she felt stuck, I suggested date nights. I listened to her vent about work, friends, family. I wasn't perfect, but I tried. That's why her "I deserve better" line cut deep. I wasn't buying it. She wasn't upset because of me. Something or someone had shifted her perspective. Maybe it was this friend she mentioned or something else. But the woman in front of me wasn't the one I married, and I wasn't going to let her rewrite our story to suit her new narrative. I didn't push back then. I just nodded and said something neutral like, "If that's what you want, we'll figure out the next steps." She seemed surprised I didn't fight or plead, but I didn't care. My focus had shifted. I needed to know who or what was behind her sudden, calculated change. She hadn't just decided to leave. This was bigger, and I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. After that talk, she moved to her own place, and I got divorce papers by Monday. They weren't just about ending the marriage. They aimed to take everything, half the house, my savings, my assets, the car. She wanted it all, plus some vague spousal support clauses that made no sense given her solid income. It felt like she expected to walk away with everything I'd built. At first, I thought she was just being spiteful, but the precision of her demands convinced me someone was advising her. So I started investigating. I couldn't just ask who she'd been talking to, so I got smart. I checked her social media. She hadn't blocked me, and though she rarely posted, I dug through her tagged photos and comments for clues. That's when I noticed a pattern. A guy named Mark kept liking and commenting on her posts. Nothing blatant, but enough to catch my eye. I clicked his profile, which was public. He seemed like a typical 30-something marketing guy. But as I scrolled, I found something odd. He'd posted a photo at the same cafe I'd seen her at weeks earlier. On the same day, I overheard her talking about a fresh start. My stomach twisted as I kept digging. More subtle hints, a comment on her photo saying, "You're killing it," and a selfie from what looked like her new place. It wasn't hard proof, but it was enough to raise alarms. I didn't know what to do with it, but I knew I couldn't sit idle. Her mention of a friend helping her stuck with me, and I needed to know who. I reached out to a mutual friend, Sarah, who'd been close to Elle for years. I kept it casual, asking if she'd talked to Elle lately or noticed anything off. Sarah shut down fast, saying she didn't know about any friend or hints. I asked a few more questions, but she got defensive and ended the call, claiming she couldn't help. It felt rushed, like she was dodging involvement. Not ready to give up, I called another friend, Claire. I used the same approach, saying I was just trying to understand things. She was cagey at first, giving vague answers. When I pressed, she hung up abruptly, leaving me more suspicious. Then, surprisingly, Claire called back. She said she needed assurance her words wouldn't come back to her. I promised they wouldn't, and after a long pause, she spilled. Apparently, Elle had been spending a lot of time with a guy named Mark from work. Claire didn't know much, but she'd heard Mark was heavily involved in the divorce advice Elle was getting. Hearing his name felt like a missing piece slotting into place. This wasn't just about her needing space or finding herself. Someone else was steering her, and I was determined to find out why. I decided to handle it my way. That Saturday, I parked a block from her apartment, hoping to confirm my suspicions. A few hours later, she and Mark walked out together. They weren't affectionate, but their closeness, leaning in to talk, was telling. They got into his car and drove off, leaving me staring at the empty street. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. It was clear she hadn't just fallen out of love with me. She'd been planning a new life with someone else, and it all clicked. The distance, the money questions, the aggressive divorce demands. She wasn't just leaving me. She was trying to leave me with nothing, and she had help. I went home that night, my mind spinning with what I'd learned. The betrayal stung, but the premeditation hurt more. She was using the divorce to springboard into whatever life she was building with Mark. But she didn't know I'd prepared for her. The first mediation session was tense from the start. Her lawyer came armed with a binder thick enough to take on a corporate giant. He listed her demands like they were reasonable. Half the house, my savings, my assets, the car, and even spousal support nonsense. I stayed quiet, waiting for my lawyer to act. When our turn came, he slid a stack of papers across the table and said, "Before we continue, everyone should review these." Her lawyer scanned the documents, his smug demeanor fading fast. "What's this?" he asked, looking at my lawyer. "These show the transfer of all major assets to a trust under my client's mother's name," my lawyer said coolly. "The transfers were completed weeks before the divorce filing, and the trust is legal and irrevocable." The room went silent. Her lawyer shot her a look, clearly annoyed. "You didn't mention this," he said flatly. She grabbed the papers, flipping through them, her face reddening. "This can't be real," she said, staring at the notarized signatures and dates. Then she turned to me, her expression shifting from disbelief to fury. "You planned this," she hissed, glaring like I'd committed a crime. "You knew I was filing and set this up to ruin me." I didn't respond. I let her piece it together. Her lawyer, visibly rattled, asked mine to explain. So he did, methodically, with every document needed to prove the transfers were ironclad. The dates lined up, showing I'd moved everything before she filed. The signatures were notarized, the trust untouchable. They had no leverage. She was livid. "You're unbelievable," she said, leaning forward. "I can't believe you'd do this to me." I stayed silent. This wasn't about hurting her. It was about protecting myself because she'd made it clear she wasn't playing fair. The meeting ended with her lawyer mumbling about needing to regroup, but everyone knew they were out of moves. Outside, she pulled me aside in the hallway, her face a mix of anger and panic. "This isn't over," she said, her voice low. "You'll regret this." I looked at her and said, "My only regret is ever trusting you." Things spiraled quickly after that. She went into full meltdown mode. It started with relentless calls. At first, she sounded remorseful, leaving voicemails like, "Can we just talk?" Or, "I know this got messy, but we can work it out." When I didn't respond, her tone shifted. By day 2, her messages swung between tears and rage. One voicemail was her crying about making a mistake and not wanting to lose what we had. The next was her accusing me of being heartless and selfish, blaming me for her misery. I ignored it all. My lawyer advised me not to engage, and I didn't want to. I was done with her games, but she wasn't. When calls and texts failed, she started spinning tailies. Friends told me she was claiming the divorce was a misunderstanding, even a stunt. A stunt? Who'd buy that? Her story fell apart fast. Friends asked, if it was a stunt, why file legal papers? Or why demand so much if it wasn't real? When people didn't buy the stunt excuse, she pivoted, saying it was a test of our marriage's strength. She painted herself as the victim, claiming my actions had betrayed her and broken our trust. At first, some people seemed to believe her. I'd get weird messages like, "I didn't know things were so bad for her." Even her sister snapped at me, saying, "You could have talked it out instead of going nuclear." It was frustrating, but I knew the truth would surface. And it did, thanks to a mutual friend, let's call him Tom. Tom and I weren't tight, but we got along. Weeks after mediation, he texted, saying he had something I needed to see. When we met, he showed me texts between Elle and Mark. I was confused. "How'd you get these?" I asked, scrolling through. Tom explained that he and Mark had a mutual friend who'd overheard their talks. This friend got worried when Mark bragged about helping Elle secure her future. It didn't take long to realize secure her future meant draining me. Feeling guilty, the friend sent screenshots to Tom, knowing he could warn me. "This guy's been playing her," Tom said, shaking his head. "He's been pushing her to take you for everything while promising to be there after." Tom handed me the texts, saying, "You didn't deserve this." The texts were brutal. Elle wasn't just venting to Mark about the divorce. She was plotting her next steps with him, and he was coaching her. One text from her read, "Once the settlement's done, we'll have what we need. I just need him to sign off." Mark replied, "Stay strong. Guilt him if you have to. He owes you. We'll start over once you've got the cash." I stared at Tom's phone, trying to process it. This wasn't a misunderstanding or an emotional outburst. It was calculated betrayal. I thanked Tom and he left, but my mind was reeling. Everything fell into place. Her sudden distance, her obsession with our finances, the aggressive divorce demands. It was all part of a scheme she'd cooked up with Mark. The texts spread quickly among our friends. Tom shared them with a few people and they circulated. Her story lost all credibility. People who'd been neutral or supportive of her started pulling away, and the shift was swift. Even her closest allies began to distance themselves. By the time the divorce was finalized, she got only her personal belongings. Her lawyer quietly dropped her claims, seeing no legal ground to stand on. My documents and the trust held firm. Mark vanished as soon as her plan fell apart. I wouldn't be shocked if he used her as much as she used me. From what I heard, he'd fed her dreams of freedom and a new life, but when it was clear she wasn't getting anything, he bylaid. Without Mark, her confidence crumbled. The calls and texts kept coming, but they turned desperate. She wasn't accusing me anymore, she was pleading. "Can we just talk? I'll do anything to fix this," one voicemail said. Another, "You don't have to forgive me, but can't we settle this and move on? I'll drop everything if you talk." I didn't respond. I couldn't. The damage was done. Even her family started pulling back. Her sister called once, apologizing for believing Elle's side at first. "I didn't know what she was doing to you," she said. "I'm sorry I bought her story." As for me, I kept the house, my savings, and something I hadn't felt in ages, peace. My mom, as always, was my anchor. She showed up with paint cans and ideas to make the place mine again. Now life feels like it belongs to me. No more overanalyzing every interaction. No more betrayal. Just calm. She's a closed chapter, one I no longer